So, beginning in verse 56, Jesus said, "Whoever has come to know the world has discovered a carcass. And whoever has discovered a carcass, of that person the world is not worthy." Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom is like a person who had good seed. His enemy came at night and sowed weeds among the good seed. The person did not let them pull up the weeds, but said to them, 'No, or you might go to pull up the weeds and pull up the wheat along with them. For on the day of the harvest, the weeds will be conspicuous and will be pulled up and burned.'" Jesus said, "Blessed is the person who has labored and has found life." Jesus said, "Look to the living one as long as you live, or you might die and then try to see the living one, and you will be unable to see." He saw, or some translations say they saw, a Samaritan carrying a lamb as he was going to Judea. He said to his disciples, "That person is carrying the lamb around." Some translations say chasing the lamb. They said to him, "Then he may kill it and eat it." He said to them, "He will not eat it while it is alive, but only after he has killed it and it has become a carcass." They said, "Otherwise he cannot do it." He said to them, "So also with you, seek for yourselves a place for rest, or you might become a carcass and be eaten." Okay. So going back to verse 56, we see this word carcass twice in our study tonight. Oh, thank you. Um, Jesus said, "Whoever has come to know the world has discovered a carcass, and whoever has discovered a carcass, of that person the world is not worthy." So the first one we're going to look at is actually Thomas verse 80. So this is the same text, and we are going to be revisiting Thomas 80 a little bit further down in the study. Now, what I've tried to do tonight, for the sake of time and having to go back and forth, I've gone ahead and just added all of the verses here. But if anyone would like to see the Hebrew or Greek translations of any specific words, we can certainly do that. Okay, I don't want you to feel like we are going to miss something. So
How about carcass?
that's what we're getting ready to get into right now. So in verse 80, Jesus said, "Whoever has come to know the world has discovered the body, and whoever has discovered the body, of that one, the world is not worthy." So this is the same concept, but a different word used here. So Thomas, this note that we have here, it says, this saying reads carcass, and it is the Greek word toma. And then saying 80 reads body, which is the word soma. Okay. One of the other notes that we have is, in the ancient world, the body was first of all part of the body politic. The connection between one's body and the world means that to withdraw from the world, one must first understand one's body. So there's a significant connection here with the body and our connection to the physical realm therein. But the thing about the carcass is something that is dead. And if you go back to the book of Leviticus, when God was giving the Israelites his law, he spoke repeatedly, numerous times, on this word carcass. And in that case, it was spelled Carcase. So slightly different than we spell it now, same meaning. But basically, he was warning them not to touch anything that was dead. This is where we get the expression, "let the dead bury themselves." They weren't supposed to be touching dead bodies. Okay. It was considered unclean. So we're going to look at that particular word in the Hebrew. Okay. So this is the word.
Strong's H 5038. Nevela. Nevela.
So dead body, dead of itself, died. Interesting, though, it also says of humans, idols, or animals. Now, an idol, we know from one of our previous studies that an idol was an image. right? And what do we see in Exodus 20 when God gives Moses the 10 Commandments? You shall not have any graven images. So this is where idols would fall into place. Any image is an idol. So things like the cross would be a very good example of an idol. So these things in that time period, many of the households would have um, small statuettes on their altars, and they would go and they would offer them sacrifices or offerings and worship them. But they were lifeless, and God even, kind of rebukes them for that. Why are you worshiping that which is dead? If it was just carved from a piece of wood, that piece of wood is not alive anymore. You're worshiping something that is dead, that has no power, right? If we look at um, the Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, it says the same thing: a corpse. Okay, this is something that is rotting and festering. It is not bearing fruit anymore, right? A lifeless tree bears no fruit. This is the same kind of concept. All right. Now, if we look at Matthew 24:28, it says, wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Some translations say vultures, and that kind of gives us a different picture of the carcass is drawing in these vultures or these buzzards that are tearing at the flesh. They're destroying this once sacred vessel that is no longer containing spirit in any way. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on that before we continue?
Just one thought, being raised Catholic, there was crosses in my family's living rooms, and I even have some that I don't pray to, but they're, I don't know, is it, I can also say pictures of people that have passed, I don't
Yeah.
praise the picture, but I remember the love of that person. So is it changed now, Jess?
Well, I don't think it's changed any. Some people would say that because Christ came and fulfilled the law, that the law is no longer necessary. I don't read Christ's teachings on that in the same way. He says that he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So, as far as I understand, the law stands. But to live legalistically instead of from the heart is kind of fruitless as well, right? That said, there are people who do consider that um, something to maybe not necessarily be worshipped, but revered. If you walk into the average American church, um, you will likely see a cross on the altar. And you have to ask yourself, if okay, I'm going to be a little graphic here, and forgive me, I do not want to offend anyone or touch a nerve, but say that you had a family member who was shot and killed. Would you want to then hang a gun on your wall? Right? This is the method of torture and execution of Christ. Now, I know that in the Catholic Church, we often see Christ still on the cross. In the evangelical crowd or the Protestant churches, they actually consider that blasphemy because Christ is no longer on the cross. But regardless, it is still the instrument of torture and murder for the Savior. Personally, I probably wouldn't want to hang something like that on my wall.
So if I could add, I think
Sure.
again, I can completely understand the the logic in that. Certainly, in fact, there was a American comedian who's not with us anymore, Bill Hicks, who was quite savage with his assessment of the Christian faith, and that was one of the things he referenced, the fact that, when Christ comes back, does he really want to see a cross again? Obviously, it was a joke. He was being silly, but the kind of counter to that is, I guess, is the kind of context of it all, and like we have like for like the war remembrance, we have like the poppy. That's so we remember those that lost their lives in World War One, and there's a famous saying as well, which is "least we forget," which kind of suggests that we shouldn't forget something like that, and the importance of the impact it had on human beings and what have you. So it's a really difficult one, I find. But the other thing as well, as I say, is I think again you can overcomplicate the thought process behind it. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And it kind of, I think things like this can maybe get unnecessarily complicated. I think some as we mentioned before, obviously for some people it's literally just like there as a kind of a memory, if you like. But that's what I wanted to add anyway.
Sure. And I think that, again, this kind of draws us back to the idea of non-judgment as well. I don't walk into someone's house who has a cross hanging on the wall and go, oh gosh, they're worshiping idols. It's very much a symbol of remembrance for a lot of people. I will say, though, that there are certain churches that will put a lot of emphasis on bring it to the cross, lay it down at the cross, and I understand the context that they're using that in, but in the same right, I do feel like they're kind of elevating the cross to a place of idolatry almost. Even and I may be very unpopular for saying this, but I think it's worth saying. I even feel that Christ has become an idol within the church. And I've talked to you guys before with regards to some of the things that God says in Isaiah, in the later chapters of Isaiah, chapters 40 through 46. He talks repeatedly about how there are no other gods but him. He will not give his glory to another. He makes it incredibly crystal clear there. And Christ comes along, and he never claims to be God. He says he is the Son of Man. So he makes that very clear. We go off of one verse where he says, I and my Father are one, and automatically assume that that means he's God. But I think the idea of Christ as God is much more nuanced than we are taught. It's he is united with God in spirit and in mind. He is connected with God. But did God literally leave his throne to enter a body? Again, very nuanced. And to put Christ on the pedestal within the church goes against what God has commanded, to not have any other gods besides him, to not have any graven images, right? So I think it's a very delicate line you walk, and a lot of that, in my perspective, has to do with where your heart is. Are you believing that that is an item to be worshipped? Are you putting that on your altar? Are you praying to it? Are you wearing it as a symbol every day? I used to wear a cross every day. I don't wear a cross anymore. I also understand that there are other connections to the cross that were just kind of absorbed into the church, but actually go back to the cycles of the seasons. So I mean, I don't know that I could split hairs and give you a definitive answer, nor would I really want to. Where's your heart at with it, Felicia? I see that you have unmuted, but I don't hear you, just so you know.
I had my headphones in, sorry.
Okay.
I feel much better about your explanation. I don't worship anything like a cross or anything, but I can see that when I do go to my church, because I love the music ministry, that I can take what I want to take out of it. And even though they have crosses up and, all of that stuff, because it's very close to the Catholic religion, um, I don't look at it that way. I don't worship the cross.
Sure.
So I don't surely wear one, but I was confused about it. So thank you for clearing that up because I surely don't want to feel any shame.
Feel no shame for that. It's kind of like the ichthys fish. A lot of people will put the ichthys fish on their cars to kind of let people know that they are a Christ follower. And it comes from this false story that the early Christians identified themselves to one another by wearing this fish symbol. The fish symbol actually comes from the mandorla, which is the center of the Vesica Pisces. It is the union between the male and the female. It's not as Christian as we would be led to believe. So, but in recent years, it has been attributed to how the early Christians identified themselves to one another. Not entirely accurate. Okay, any other questions? Any other thoughts? Okay. All right, verse 57. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom is like a person who has good seed. His enemy came during the night and sowed weeds among the good seed. The person did not let the workers pull up the weeds, but said to them, 'No, otherwise you might go to pull up the weeds and pull up the wheat along with them. For on the day of the harvest, the weeds will be conspicuous and will be pulled up and burned.'" So we are going to go look at this story in Matthew 13, verses 24 through 30. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and in the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So, a couple of things. First of all, good seeds bear good fruit, right? Secondly, if you let the weeds grow, they will eventually reveal themselves. Now, what do you think Christ was saying to his disciples here? He's claiming that the Father's kingdom is like a person who has good seed. So the Father's kingdom is like someone who is planting things that are going to bear good fruit. What about these tares, though? What about the weeds that get thrown in among them? Who do you think this could be in the Father's kingdom? Everybody's quiet. It's okay. So this could be people who maybe are not, who don't have honest intentions, or who are seeking to subvert God's kingdom in some way, right? It could be that these are in the mind. Maybe this isn't, people within the body. Maybe this is within the body itself, in our mind, these thoughts that are damaging, that can choke out the healthy, strong crops. And yet, Christ is saying, let them grow anyway. Why? And do you think this is pertaining to people, or do you think this is pertaining to thoughts, or both?
I wonder if it's the it's a statement about, just to clarify, that heaven is or God's kingdom is a place of purity where there will be no enemy, so to speak. Maybe it's not supposed to be read in as much as each individual part of it being dissected to try and give it some meaning, but the meaning is in the whole statement, holistically. That just the fact that they're saying my father's kingdom is like, to say my father's kingdom is like a person, and then to analyze that on its own, I think it seems like it's quite challenging. Whereas if it's my father's kingdom is like a person, and then you're reading the rest of it, who has sows good seed, and the enemy comes and and all the way to the end, then maybe it's supposed to be interpreted like that. I'm not saying it is. It's just a possibly. It's possible that the whole parable is purely for the purpose of identifying um, God's kingdom as somewhere where there is no enemy.
Okay, that's an
Which is
interesting way of looking at that.
which is a kind of a washed out way of looking at it. I know, but it's because it's a tricky one. I do struggle with some of the parables sometimes, and they're quite complex in their nature. And because the other thing to consider as well is I don't know. I don't know exactly how the language was used. I know that obviously the Hebrew language. I don't know about Aramaic, but I know Hebrew's not. The sentence structure isn't sequential. Like the dog chased the cat down the street. It's not written as such. It's not put in that sequential manner. There's certain things. I think Aleph Tav is a marker for the action of that sentence. So I don't know. I'm swinging in the dark really, but it's like the Genesis is considered to be Hebrew poetry. I think they broke it down and discovered that Genesis was very much in keeping with Hebrew poetry of the time. So I'm really trying not to sort of go off on a tangent, but that was just my thoughts anyway.
Okay, all right. So I will say that as we have it, this would come from the Greek. So we would have to look at that from the perspective of more of the Greek poetry, right? And I think that your stance on this bears considering. In your average Bible study, we're often told that the tares or the wheat are wicked people who do not have the best of intentions, that are trying to infiltrate and subvert the church. I have to kind of challenge that with that it's more within the mind. I feel like we have positive thoughts, we have negative thoughts. And over time, at least in my own experience, and I don't know, I'd be curious to hear everyone else's experience with this. Over time, eventually those negative thoughts kind of root themselves out. Um, I'll get to a point where I'm like, well, why on earth was I ever thinking that? It was just foolishness. So it's kind of like that purifying fire has washed its way through my conscious or even my subconscious to eliminate those thoughts that would otherwise subvert that purity and that wholesomeness of the kingdom that Jesus has already told us is inside of us. So that's kind of where I was going with that in terms of challenging the traditional way of teaching this verse with something a little bit different, just because of what we've already learned about what Christ said about the kingdom and where we can find it. So I'd be curious to hear everybody else's thoughts with regards to like negative thinking patterns and how they either maintain themselves or how they dissipate over time. Felicia, do you have your headphones in?
Not anymore.
Okay.
I do have a little thought about whether it's people or whether it's in your head. I mean, in order of us to see the light in ourselves, sometimes we have that darkness to bring out the light. And when we bring out the light, it's something that can be at least acknowledged. But I also think about the balance, and then without the good, without the bad, there is no good. There's no comparison.
Yes. Yes, that was actually part of our discussion yesterday regarding the Secret of Water. I'm still really hung up on that documentary. It's fantastic. But I agree with you. Sometimes when we have a negative thought or even a negative experience, I find this a lot in negative experiences. I'm a very experiential person. That I I used to only see the, oh, woe is me. Could it get any worse? Life is terrible. But now I see it as, oh, what am I meant to learn from this experience? Maybe it feels uncomfortable and it's not pleasant, but how is it going to grow me and how is it going to help? I think of the dandelion. The dandelion appears in the soil when the soil needs mending. So when we have what we would consider a weed, which is actually one of the healthiest weeds you can eat, it it is there to serve a purpose and do something good to restore the health of the soil. But most people just spray it with Roundup or cut it down. They don't see it in the same way. So I really like your thinking on this, Felicia, that, perhaps maybe it's kind of maybe even a little bit of both, right? Sometimes rotten people help us to evaluate our own rotten thoughts, right?
Well, I tell you what, if I didn't have weeds in my backyard, I wouldn't have any green at all, I don't think. I like my weeds in the backyard.
And Katie sounds like she's kind of concurring, and she says that she reflects on why she has that thought and where did it come from. And I agree, it does kind of make you reevaluate your thought process and whether things are even worth your time, right? Sometimes we get worked up about things that really aren't worth our time. All great thoughts. I love how everyone is digging deep and challenging me, going outside of the box. I love it. Okay, plug in for a little bit. Okay. Any further thoughts or questions about that before we move on? Make sure I give everybody a chance to share. And worry, yes. Worry is like a rocking chair, right? It gives you something to do, but it gets you nowhere. That's why Jesus says, don't worry about what you will eat or what you will wear, right? Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. Yes. Okay. Verse 58. Jesus said, congratulations to the person who has toiled and has found life, Now, before I go into this any further, I just have to say that the word toiled reminds me very much of working the land. It reminds me of what God tells Adam after they are removed from the garden, after him and Eve are removed from the garden. And he says that he will have to work the land to get his food. And for some reason, toiled just brings that to mind for me. Interestingly, one of the notes in the Nag Hammadi says, or who has suffered. So sometimes it is not translated who has toiled, but who has suffered. Um, hmm, okay, we might dig into that in a minute. But when we look up the etymology of the word toil, usually means hard work. Originally, turmoil, contention, dispute. So this could lead to some suffering, right? From toiler, agitate, stir up, entangle, writhe about. From Old French, I'm probably really going to butcher this, so my apologies. Toiliere, drag about, make dirty. Usually said to be from Latin tudiculare, crush with a small hammer. So this word has kind of gone through some pretty interesting evolution, right? Yeah, Katie says through life's challenges, we certainly learn gratitude and appreciation. Indeed. And I would say, yeah, we kind of do find life in that, right? Um, it goes back to some of the things that we were talking about, some of these difficult situations, and where the only thing we could really do was pray, right? And when we did that, that's when our healing came, or that's when a resource that we needed came, or something to prove that God is listening, right? Showed up in our lives. So we really can find life in the midst of the struggle if we're not looking at it as, oh, woe is me, but as, oh, well, what is going to come out of this? What can I learn from this? Right. Now we have a lot of corresponding verses to go with this. So I'm just going to read a few of them. If any of you has something that you would like to share, please stop me. I won't be watching the screen, but just holler. Okay. Proverbs 8:34 through 36. Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoso findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. Ooh. Okay, so this is someone who is actively seeking God. It's it's kind of like fanboying or fangirling it, right? You're standing outside their door waiting for them to come out, right? Lined up with the paparazzi because you cannot wait to see what they're going to do next. It's kind of like that, at least from this particular passage. That's the image that it invokes in my mind is, they're waiting, they're watching for him, right? And think about it. If you are actively looking for miracles, you will see miracles. I don't know how it works, but I know that it works. If you are looking for sadness and despair, you will see sadness and despair, right? Okay, Sirach 51:26 through 27. Now, this was part of the Apocrypha. So you will find this in some of the older versions of the Bible, right? Before they removed the apocryphal text from it. Put your neck under the yoke and let your soul receive instruction. She is hard at hand to find. Behold with your eyes how that I have but little labor and have gotten unto me much rest. Okay, so we've seen that before. And rest, as we'll see in just a little bit, is often interchanged with life and with salvation. Okay. But this kind of harkens back to my yoke is easy and my burden is light, right? It is an active working out and walking out and toiling and wrestling with God, right? It was Jacob that wrestled with God, and he could see God working, right? When we are actively seeking that which God is doing in our lives and the lives of others around us in the world, even though the world sometimes can look completely hopeless, we can see God's weaving something together. There's a small thread of hope and joy and love and peace that is just kind of knitting everything together. And we don't fully understand everything, but just like in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who love God and are the called according to his purpose. It is all things, even those things which are uncomfortable for us or even painful for us. Further down in Thomas, which we will be in a few weeks, verses 68 and 69, Jesus said, "Congratulations to you when you are hated and persecuted, and no place will be found wherever you have been persecuted." Jesus said, "Congratulations to those who have been persecuted in their hearts. They are the ones who have truly come to know the Father. Congratulations to those who go hungry, so the stomach of the one in want may be filled." So this is kind of hearkening back to the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the hungry, right? These are finding yourself in a place of need and then having your needs fulfilled, right? Okay, let's go because we have some more on the next page. Lots of them. Here we are, Matthew 5:10-13. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. So again, you got to have a little spice in your life, right? You can't just have this glorious, perfect existence without turmoil, contention, dispute, hard work, right? Being dragged about, entangled, crushed, right? Pressed down but not destroyed, persecuted but not abandoned. Luke 6:22-23. Blessed are ye when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from their company, and shall reproach you, and cast out your name as evil for the Son of Man's sake. Rejoice ye in that day, and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven, for in the like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. So you're not the only one this is happening to. These people that went before you, they suffered the same. Matthew 11:28-30. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. James 1:12. This is my mom's favorite verse. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. 1 Peter 3:14. But and if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye, and be not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled. Ooh, this adds a new facet now, right? Not only are we supposed to endure that which is difficult, but we should be doing it fearlessly. Now, would you say that that facet of it makes it easier or harder? Let's look at this one. This expands upon it a little bit. We'll come back to that question. 1 Peter 4:13-14. But rejoice inasmuch as ye are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. So does that make the suffering easier or harder if you rejoice in your suffering? Thoughts? Headphones. Felicia, do you have your headphones in? There you go.
Um, yeah, I guess it's human nature not to rejoice in suffering. It's,
Mm,
you know, but in maybe in, as time goes by, you can see that it is a blessing. Um, but you don't know it I guess it's an oxymoron because in
mm,
general, humans are going to be sad and those lower vibrations when they are suffering.
mhm. Yeah. But what would happen? What would change our situation if we changed our perspective in the midst of it instead of waiting until after we've come out the other side of it? Could we look at the glass as half full? Could we see the light on the horizon? And could we see the joy of the present, or are we focused on the light on the horizon? Because that adds a whole other facet to it, right? If we're so focused on, oh, well, it'll be better in the future, the light at the end of the tunnel, are we missing the moment? Are we missing the present and what we could be learning from that present and how we could rejoice in that present? Lots to unpack, huh? Ah, I love that, Katie. That's where embodiment comes in. It really is important to get down into the body and to have the opportunity to feel the emotion. And I think you have a very special advantage in the line of work that you do with emotion code, Katie, to be able to see how emotions are stored up in the body and how they manifest physically, and the importance of embodiment in the moment that the emotion is occurring so that you don't end up storing it in the body. Yes, she does work wonders. Her and I have sessions together every 2 weeks. We exchange services. So I'm very thankful for Katie and for all of the amazing work that she has done on me, because she has opened me up a lot, especially from physical pain. Yes, feel it to heal it and then release it. Yeah, you are gifted, Katie. You surely are. Okay. Anybody have any other thoughts? Okay, now this one is interesting. Ah, I'm always happy to honor that gift in you and share whatever I can in response. So verse 59, Jesus said, "Look to the living one as long as you live. Otherwise, you might die, and then try to see the living one, and you will be unable to see." So who is the living one? Because my first thought was, okay, this is Christ, right? But if Christ is the Lord, and to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, according to the scriptures, then even if you were dead, you would still see him, right? Or would you? Is he talking about himself? Or is he talking about something completely different? If you are looking for the living one as long as you live, then you maybe won't die. Because if you don't, you might. Lots of questions here for me, anyway. What do you guys think? I've got some verses to read, but just curious if you have any thoughts before we go forward. Okay, in Thomas, verse 32, it says, Jesus said, often you have desired to hear these sayings that I am speaking to you, and you have no one else from whom to hear them. There will be days when you will seek me and you will not find me. John 7, verses 33 through 36. Then said Jesus unto them, Yet a little while am I with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. Ye shall seek me and shall not find me, and where I am, thither ye cannot come. Then said the Jews among themselves, Whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? What manner of saying is this that he said, Ye shall seek me and shall not find me, and where I am, thither ye cannot come? So he's even confusing the people of his day. They're like, wait a minute, where are you going? So a lot of people would say that he's going to go up to heaven. Well, so where do we go when we die? Or is this an allegorical death and an allegorical life? What if he's talking about being dead, just like as he was talking about the carcass in verse 56? This idea of a body that has no life in it because it is only seeking that which saves or nourishes the physical body, but not that which saves and nourishes the soul. Because it seems, at least in the Gospel of Thomas, that there's a lot more chastisement going on towards the disciples from Jesus. He's kind of telling them they're a little bit hard-headed and they're not really paying attention to what he's telling them. So what if their pursuits are vain pursuits, and because of that, they're not on the path that they think they are? Let's see some of the other ones. Oh, here we go. No, that's it. Okay, well, I'll let you guys chew on that for a little bit. If you think of anything, like I said before, stop me. I don't mind. Move that. It's getting on my nerves. There we go. Verse 60. He saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb and going to Judea. He said to his disciples, that person around the lamb. We assume that was chasing around the lamb or carrying around the lamb. And we can see that in the scribal notes. They said to him, so that he may kill it and eat it. He said to them, he will not eat it while it is alive, but only after he has killed it and it has become a carcass. They said, otherwise he can't do it. He said to them, so also with you, seek for yourselves a place for rest, or you might become a carcass and be eaten. Okay, so one of the notes, before I go into any of these verses, one of the notes for this talked about going back to Thomas 2:4 for the Greek word for rest. This term is quite common in Thomas. Its soteriological significance is clear. To find rest is tantamount to salvation. Here, its association with the quest for insight reflects its roots in the wisdom tradition. In Thomas, one achieves rest through insight in the present, not in a future existence. By contrast, later Gnostic groups spoke of the hoped-for reunion of the Gnostic soul with the God of heavenly remove as achieving rest. In the New Testament, rest is also associated with a future hope. So it's interesting that in Thomas, it's not something that happens in the future. Remember, I was saying earlier, looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, right? That is not where your hope comes from, looking for something ahead of yourself. Think about it. You can only see so far ahead of you anyway. Now, if you are, say you're driving down the road and there's dense fog, you have even less visibility to see very far in front of you at all. Now, you know that road fairly well, you know where you're going, and you should be able to travel it pretty well despite not being able to see very well. However, you don't know what obstacles lie ahead. And you can't even begin to assume what obstacles lie ahead, right? You could speculate, I suppose, but what good is that going to do you? That's that concept of worry again. So you have to be present in the moment as you are driving that road. You have to be actively paying attention to watch for potential obstacles. Right? Now that doesn't seem like a very restful kind of state of being. But like I said before, if you're looking for miracles, if you're looking for where God is working, then you're more likely to see it. The same applies to that foggy road, right? So isn't it kind of restful when you can see God working miracles and you don't have to be so focused on the what if and the worry? You know, if you have been through enough trials where God has continued to provide for you in spite of whatever state you were in when you asked for help during those trials, then you're more likely to trust and believe that you will have your needs met in any situation. Because you've been looking, you've been paying attention from the very beginning to God's miracles in your own life, to the directions. Say, you're traveling down that road and there's something in the road, right? A tree has fallen. I use this app called Waze, helps me get around. I'm terrible with directions, but it's okay. But if there's something in the roadway, it lets me know in advance so that I can accommodate for that ahead of time. So if we're actively paying attention to God's voice in our lives, you may be on that foggy road and maybe you don't have an app that tells you there's something on the road, but you just know, you just have an instinct, maybe I should slow down. And then you have enough time to react. And that's that still small voice that's telling you, hey, navigate this way, make this correction. And you can see that in your whole life if you're paying attention. There's always been something guiding you, something protecting you, something providing for you. However you want to name that. But if you're not paying attention for that, you won't see that. You have to be present. You have to be in the moment. I love that. Whisper in the wind, Sophia, the Queen of Heaven. Oh, I could go on for hours. I could go on for hours. Oh, we're over here now. So just a couple notes here for the scribal error. Has created a defective text here. Perhaps it once read, why does that person carry around the lamb? It may also be read literally, that person is around the lamb, but it is unclear what such a statement would mean. So, scribal error. All right, Thomas 7. Jesus said, lucky is the lion that the human will eat, so that the lion becomes human. And foul is the human that the lion will eat, and the lion still will become human. Remember, we talked about this a while back. You guys remember this somewhat challenging verse? Right? By the way, that which devours will gain our resources, our energy, our life force, right? But if we devour the lion first, then we gain their life force and we make it human. That was a challenging verse to unpack back then. And if you guys want to revisit that, I can go back through the notes. But for now, we're going to keep moving. But like I said, if you're interested, we can go revisit it. Thomas 11:3. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die. During the days when you ate what is dead, you made it come alive. When you are in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you become two, what will you do? This was another hard one to unpack. The living will not die? Again, this goes back to the idea of the living one, right? Look to the living one as long as you live. When you were one, you became two. When you become two, what will you do? I don't think I want to unpack that for you. I can, but I think you already have your own wisdom, each one of you, on that one. Feel free to share, though. Thomas 50:3. Jesus said, if they say to you, where have you come from? Say to them, we have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. If they say to you, is it you? Say, we are its children, and we are the chosen of the living Father. If they ask you, what is the evidence of your Father in you? Say to them, it is motion and rest. Could that be the two? Motion and rest. We don't think of the same understanding of both of those. Motion and rest are polar opposites, right? Kind of reminds me of that conversation we were having earlier today, Katie, about static. Yes, kinetic energy, right? An oxymoron, yes. Well, it's about that balance, right? And what we were just talking about with regards to rest, being present, being aware, looking for what you're supposed to be seeing in the moment, that in a sense is motion, right? It's action, right? So Thomas 51:1, his disciples said to him, when will the rest for the dead take place? And when will the new world come? He said to them, what you are looking forward to has come, but you don't know it. Again, rest for the dead. Aren't the dead already resting? Strange wording. Sorry, Caleb just came in. He's sitting and listening. We've had lots of existential conversations lately, so I'm enjoying that he's in here sharing this time with us. So we would think that the dead would already be at rest, right? Even the Bible tells us that the dead are sleeping, right? When will the new world come? It's already here. The rest is already here. You don't have to wait until you're dead to rest. Thomas 90. Jesus said, "Come to me, for my yoke is comfortable and my lordship is gentle, and you will find rest for yourselves." Again, if you put a yoke on an ox, you're preparing him to do work. How is that restful? In the way that we would consider the word rest, it wouldn't be. But this is a different understanding of rest entirely, right? This is working, but without labor, if that makes sense. It is light work, it is easy work, it is joyful. It is being awake and aware to the magic that is all around us, thanks to God, thanks to spirit, thanks to the divine, however you want to word that.
It's not work, it's creation.
How so?
Well, like if you were to work on like a Sabbath day, but you're doing something you enjoy, you're more creating either something like art or creating enjoyment for yourself.
So is it really work?
That's what I mean. It's
Right.
not work, it's
Yeah.
creation.
So I'm not sure if you guys could hear Caleb, but he said that, you know, even if you're working on the Sabbath, if you're doing something that you enjoy, if you're creating something, then it's not necessarily work, right? What is that expression? If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? I know that in terms of the Sabbath day specifically, you're not supposed to lift any heavy burdens in or out of your house, and you're not supposed to go buy anything. So, no, absolutely not. He asked, would it be a burden to create what I love? No, I enjoy it. I enjoy doing what I love. So we did already look at Matthew 11, 28 through 29. And that is this one over here. You can come unto me, all ye that labor. I'm not going to read that again, but I will leave that there for a second for you guys to read. For his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Okay. And if you guys would like these notes, I will happily send them to you in a PDF. This comes from a yeah, thank you for joining me. This comes from a non-canonical text. I love you too, my dear. The dialogue of the Savior, verse 25. Matthew said, "Why do we not rest at once?" Some translations say, "Why do we not rest together?" Oh, the Lord said, "When you lay down these burdens," Matthew said, "how does the small join itself to the big?" The Lord said, "When you abandon the works which will not be able to follow you, then you will rest." That clears it up even more, right? The works that you're doing that will not be able to follow you, fruitless pursuits, right? Think about it. What do they say? You can't take it with you when you're gone, right? You can't focus only on the tangible. And that's kind of been the whole point of all of these verses, the physical, the material, the tangible. But you can work on things like relationships, community, right? Giving back in some way. Those are the things that aren't really work. And that's storing up treasures in heaven, right? It's not about the physical things that you can accumulate here on this earth that will not be able to fit into the coffin when you go. Life is temporary, right? Our souls are eternal, but life is temporary. We also have a reference to Sirach 51, 26 through 27. We saw that on the previous page. Put your neck under the yoke. So again, if you would like a copy of the notes, I would be happy to send that to you. have but little labor and have gotten much rest. Sirach 6, 23 through 31. And this is the last bit that we're gonna talk about tonight. Give ear, my son, receive my advice, and refuse not my counsel, and put thy feet into her fetters, and thy neck into her chain. Bow down thy shoulder and bear her, and be not grieved with her bonds. Come unto her with thy whole heart, and keep her ways with all thy power. Search and seek, and she shall be made known unto thee. And when thou hast got hold of her, let her not go. For at the last thou shalt find her rest, and that shall be turned to thy joy. Then shall her fetters be a strong defense for thee, and her chains a robe of glory. For there is a golden ornament upon her, and her bands are purple lace. Thou shalt put her on as a robe of honor, and shalt put her about thee as a crown of joy. Ooh. Now, this kind of sounds like someone is trying to attain something. And we see things like golden ornament, purple lace, crown of joy, robe of honor. We see these things and go, oh, those are material things. But are they? Honor and joy really aren't tangible things per se. What's he talking about here? I have a feeling that a few of you might be able to guess this, if not all of you. And why is it her? She is wisdom. The Sophia, right? Philosophia, philosophy, love of Sophia. Wisdom, attaining wisdom, that's something that will follow you 1,000 lifetimes. It's not something tangible. You don't have to make room in the coffin for that. It will follow you wherever you go. And what do we do when we are paying attention? We are gaining wisdom. And in that wisdom, we can have rest. Because in that wisdom, we realize, oh, well, we're safe. Everything's taken care of. We are provided for. We are divinely protected. And that, my friends, leads to the peace that surpasses all understanding. That is all I had for you guys tonight. Any final thoughts? Any questions?
Why, Jess, why did you think parables were used so much by Christ?
Honestly, I believe that Christ was a teacher of the esoteric wisdom. I believe he was teaching the mysteries that date back thousands of years before his existence. That's my honest opinion.
In one of the things I used to like with Zen Buddhism was some of the I can't remember what they called them. They did have a name. But as an example, there was one with there was a story. It was like like a parable, I guess, and it was about two monks that were crossing a river, and there was a young woman trying to cross the river and struggling, and at that time within that sect of monks, it was forbidden for them to touch a woman, and one of the monks puts her on his shoulders to help her across so she doesn't drown, and they all cross the river, and when they get to the other side, the woman leaves and thanks them, and they carry on walking for a bit, And the other monk, the one who didn't carry the woman, turns around and said, I can't believe you did that. That's forbidden. To which the monk who carried the lady replied, are you still carrying her? So again, it's quite interesting that I mean, that obviously it's, that in those sort of times, it seems to have been like a preferred method of sharing wisdom. But yeah, very fascinating.
Well, even in the esoteric traditions, there were the neophytes, the initiates who were just learning about the mystery traditions. And so they were kind of fed small bits like a baby. And we even see that in scripture. At first we eat milk as an infant, and then when we grow, we can eat meat, right? The same applies to our understanding of scripture. We read it first on a very literal level, and we understand the basics. The parables are very simplistic in their nature, while also being incredibly complex, so that even the simplest of folk could understand the simplistic message behind it. But then the more complex, the deeper esoteric meaning would be understood by the people who were a bit more advanced in their training. And I don't think that Christ was any exception to that. I think that the reason we see these undercurrents that are so similar in all of the major world religions is because they all point back to mysticism and the mystery schools. And I know that that's an unpopular opinion.
Do you think that that would have probably served the purpose of allowing everyone to enjoy the fruit of that given faith, but for those that can understand and dissect the deeper meaning, that they were tasked with preserving the roots of that religion? You see what I mean? It's multifaceted in that respect, isn't it? It allows everybody to enjoy and benefit from that belief, but there are ultimately still people who would be tasked with preserving that, and they're the ones that would need the deeper meaning. And I mean that respectfully, without suggesting that anybody would, put themselves on an altar and suggest that they're greater or at a higher level. It's purely the for the purpose of the greater good.
And I think that it's interesting that you say, about people putting themselves on a pedestal. If we look at the priestly caste of the Israelites, the Levites, right? They were not allowed to own any property. They were supposed to be solely provided for by the other tribes. The priests were not allowed to own any kind of property, any kind of cattle, anything like that, because their provision came from the people whom they served. And that kept them humble, right? They didn't get to be arrogant and haughty. They were able to remain humble and still hold the sacred teachings and make sure that they weren't perverted. And I think that's one of the reasons, at least in my understanding of esotericism, why a lot of this is preserved in parable form and is kind of elusive to the average reader, is because people tend to pervert the meaning of it. And that's why I ask you guys to kind of weigh in on this stuff, and I give you my own insights and what I have learned from other scholars, but I never, ever, ever want to come across as I'm the ultimate authority and I know what I'm talking about. I'm only telling you what I think I understand by it based on what I have learned through other scholarship. And it keeps me humble. I do think that many of us who are actively seeking the deeper truths of God have been tasked with keeping this wisdom. And and sharing it with others who are ready to hear it. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't ready to hear it. A lot of people will tune it out. I had a discussion today about a doctrine that didn't originate within the church until 1978. The idea that the Bible is inerrant and infallible didn't come about until 1978. That is routinely parroted in most churches, and it's not a biblical doctrine at all. The closest we can come to is 2 Timothy 3:16, where it says that scripture is God breathed and it is profitable, but it doesn't say that it's infallible or inerrant. And that is something that people routinely tell others about the Bible. Even the Hebrews do not believe that their sacred scriptures are infallible.
A.C. Benson, the author of the book A Thread of Gold, said that to consider it infallible would be a sin against the truth.
And see, that's exactly my point. And I kind of had to graciously bow out of the argument at some point, because it was not fruitful. I was being accused of calling God a liar and saying that Jesus was less than perfect and purposely trying to find fault in the scriptures, and that was not my intent at all. My understanding is that God is omniscient, and if he foreknew that there would be some discrepancies in the text, and that would probably be a point of concern for a lot of people, why would he have allowed that if he has preserved his word as infallible and inerrant? Yeah, I think it's a dangerous thing for us to tell people that, and then they find these inconsistencies. And I love you too, girl. And we will definitely be lifting up your prayers as well. But I think that's why people turn away from Christians. They may be willing to hear them for a time until they see for themselves the inconsistencies, and they walk away. And I feel like we miss the opportunity to speak love into their lives because we've lost all credibility.
I agree.
Well, that is all of the study. I'm going to stop the recording now so that we can move into a time of prayer.